So who's in charge of English? I'm Joseph. This is Input English. Let's get started on this interesting topic. Who's in charge? Who sets the standards for English? Is anybody in charge? Well, it turns out not exactly, no. So if you look around the world and at the various languages, it is common for a commission or an organization to be in charge of the integrity of that language. I'll use an example, the Real Academia Española. The RAE sets the standards for usage of expressions, words, grammar in the Spanish language. English doesn't have such a commission. We don't have a body in charge. As close as we get to somebody being in charge would be the input we get from the Oxford English Dictionary. Yes, they render opinions and they publish them, and people can refer to them, but it doesn't have force of law by any means. They are not really in a position to make hard and fast rules for us using the English language. From an American perspective, I was fascinated by the order that could come from having an oversight commission, or perhaps the tyranny. So I looked into it as I was studying Spanish to see what it amounted to. I didn't really do a deep dive, but I've uncovered an interesting concept, and that is, in Spain, for instance, they're a little sensitive about the invasion of English expressions into the Spanish language. Now, I don't find fault with their concerns at all. In some respects, English is kind of like cockroaches. It just goes everywhere. And one of the expressions that was pointed out to me in my reading was, in Spain, the tendency to use the word vale. And they tend to use it where we would use the word okay. I probably should do a separate video on the expression okay. It was actually made up as a joke because okay stood for all correct. And so O is not the letter for all, and K is not the letter for correct, but all correct is how we started with okay. And then it went everywhere. So I don't know if the RAE decided to promote vale as a way to prevent the invasion of the expression okay or not. I'm not an expert on that, but it has been suggested as perhaps the reason that you hear vale so much. Okay. In contradistinction, English is more of a free-for-all, a melee. Melee is a fun word. It came from French. We just lifted it right out of French. And melee, or free-for-all, is a fight or hand-to-hand combat, usually involving multiple people. So melee or free-for-all suggests conflict. And that's a great way to describe English. It's not an orderly process in the way it's developing. It's a more organic language development. There are a lot of influences on the development of the English language in history. In about the 8th century AD, there was a large Norse invasion of England. They set up settlements in England, and a big swath of England became known as Danelaw. At roughly the same time, other groups of Norsemen from Norway invaded Scotland, what is now Scotland. And these invasions had big effects on the English language. The Norse were present on the British Isles for more than a century, and because of intermingling, intermarriage, a lot of expressions which originally came from Old Norse wound up inserted into the English language. Now you can see them today. A lot of words that begin with TH and a lot of words that begin with SK have origins in Old Norse. When you say skull, that word came originally from Old Norse. A lot of our pronouns come from Old Norse. The TH, they, the, those TH sound words frequently came from Old Norse. There was a big influence on the English language from that invasion. Not too much later than that, there was another big invasion with big effects. That was the Norman invasion of 1066. This brought a great deal of French words and expressions into the English language because the Norman conquest set up the government as a French-speaking government. So we can see from that history and invasions weigh heavy on the English language and its development. Over the long term, popular culture and creative influences have changed the English language, not just now, but hundreds of years ago. What I'm referring to is William Shakespeare. Shakespeare was notorious for making up words, for combining words to make a new word, and creating expressions which we use today. In yesterday's video, I closed out by saying, "'Tis enough, 'twill serve." That was from Romeo and Juliet, and it was Mercutio speaking. What he said was, "No, 'tis not so deep as a well, nor so wide as a church door, but 'tis enough, 'twill serve. Ask for me tomorrow, and you shall find me a grave man." So occasionally when you speak with someone in English, you might hear someone say, "'Tis enough, 'twill serve." It has been estimated that Shakespeare generated on the order of 1,500 new words that are present in the English language and are used to this day. Whether it's a little more than 1,500 or a little fewer, doesn't really matter, but common words came from Shakespeare. The word gossip. And of course, gossip refers to speaking about someone behind their back, talking about personal details, tawdry details. He was the first to use the word manager in one of his plays. How often is manager used in the English language in modern days? He did a lot of combining of words. For instance, puppy dog and bedroom. Puppy dog remains as two words, but is said as a combined expression. Bedroom has become a single word. And prior to Shakespeare's use, bed chamber or sleeping chamber was the more common way to refer to a bedroom. He created the term skim milk. It's an everyday term used in commerce, and it came right from the pen of William Shakespeare. He adapted an Italian word, bandito, and created the word bandit to mean a robber. He applied the suffix un in front of comfortable to create the word uncomfortable. So we all know what it's like to be comfortable, and he negated that, creating a new word. He coined the expression addiction for someone who is dependent on a substance or something. Addiction was not used in the English language prior to its use by William Shakespeare. Aldous Huxley wrote a book called Brave New World, and he obtained his title from the pages of William Shakespeare's writings. Brave New World came from The Tempest. I don't want this video to degenerate into a long vocabulary list with people trying to memorize words. These were just part of the story. These were examples of wonderful things that William Shakespeare provided to us to enrich the English language. I think in the future there will be opportunities to do a deeper dive on some of these expressions, but again, everything needs to be presented in context, in a way that makes sense, and not just a list of vocabulary. That's not the business we're in. So as we consider the behavior of William Shakespeare and his tendency to simply make up words, the obvious question is, can we just make up words in English? Well, the answer is yes, because there's no one preventing you from doing that. Most made-up words are made up in families, and most of them don't stick. They don't stay around. They don't get picked up in common usage. There are some made-up words that you might occasionally hear that form a pattern. In English, if we want to express that something is inflamed or irritated, we use the word ending itis. So if someone has a rash on their skin, that is a dermatitis. Or if somebody has an inflamed, infected appendix, that's appendicitis. A chest infection could be bronchitis. So a lot of itis words are in the English language and are used. When I was college age and working, one of the fellows, my coworkers, made up an itis word, which I thought was very charming. He was talking about someone who was either very tired or very lazy, and he said they had body no movalitis. Now, this is not a word that got picked up in English, and I'm not trying to teach that to you, but what he did was made up a word that in that conversation made sense to us, and he used it fairly often. My wife actually invented an itis word. It's similar to homesickness, but it's not homesickness. She and I traveled a great deal over the years, and she recognized that once we had started the return trip, we were both very anxious to be at home, not so much that we were homesick, but we were ready to get on with things. And this return home part of the trip was a barrier to resuming our activities, starting new projects. It was something that we needed to do. And she described get home-itis. Now again, don't memorize this, and I'm not trying to get it inserted into the English language, but you will see people playfully make up words. Children do it all the time. Playful adults do it all the time. Luckily, most of them don't stick. They don't stay around. We get a lot of terms from popular culture, social media, television, and advertising. Some expressions come into vogue and are used and then become antiquated and are deleted from usage, not by an official act of an oversight organization, but they just become extinct. They just disappear. 120 years ago, someone might refer to a woman in the United States as a dame. Now, as I understand it, that was not a pejorative. It was not disrespectful. It was just a term used to refer to a woman, a dame. But in the present day, you never hear that expression. It is antiquated and it's been deleted. Now, I should mention that if you do hear someone referring to a woman as a dame, it probably is in humor or in irony. That is, they are using an archaic term on purpose for effect, often trying to amuse the listener. Corporate life has generated a lot of expressions, and they have been used in the English language, although it is very much in question whether they will be tolerated over the long term. If you work in a big corporation, particularly if you go to meetings, you might hear some manager, when they're trying to look into the details of a phenomenon, say, we need to drill down. And they may use that gesture, drill down. If you're trying to get an agreement among people in the organization or between organizations, you might look for a win-win. You might anticipate conflict or disagreement, and you might be on guard for pushback. So for a manager in a corporation, you would definitely want a win-win situation so that you could get buy-in and try to avoid pushback. Now, I'm making fun of those expressions because I think they're strange. And my opinion is most of them will be overused. People will get sick of them and they will disappear. When I was working in a big corporate environment and went to meetings and heard that kind of prattle from some manager giving a presentation, I couldn't help but to laugh. I thought they were kidding. I thought they were lampooning corporate life, and I had no idea that their presentation was actually in earnest. They were serious. So what did I do as a typical adult who inside feels like an 11-year-old? I made fun of them, of course. I think a lot of those corporate terms will go away as they become hackneyed, as they're overused and not appreciated any longer. So why do I tell you all this? Well, with a lack of oversight in the development of English, and with a lot of known influences that date back hundreds of years, I've painted a picture of a very complex language. And for me, that just means it's very organic. It's evolving. It's changing. For the language learner, there are two issues. One, comprehensible input is the way to go, because with this level of complexity, memorization and memorizing rules and following rules isn't going to work. So if you try to learn English by traditional methods without using comprehensible input, you will be totally frustrated and your results will probably not be very good. Input is the way to go. The other point is English is a bit of a moving target because it is evolving. Now, the good news for you is it's moving very slowly. So if you learn the version of English that is being spoken today, you'll be fine, because once you have it, you can evolve your understanding of English along with the language as it evolves. So you'll be fine. It is very clear to me that in the 21st century, we do not speak in the United States the way people spoke in the 1950s and 60s. No, it's very different. I could say that a lot of the expressions that you hear in English these days are the ones that are fashionable. And that would be true, but you have to understand we got the word fashionable from William Shakespeare. And if you like videos like this, be sure to click on this one next. See you soon.